I'm just going to focus on I just need more space. So we said that we don't worry about this side yet. We worry about that this afternoon. So we did 3 zones. What we talked about now was just this one little zone, which is also the most important one. Okay. Now we have an option. We have to decide. We know that this is a non-negotiable. That needs to be in the program. And by the end of the day, if you remember what we said earlier, if you want to improve power, you need to do heavy resistance training plus plyo, which means that we're going to find out that there's going to be a complementary part on this side of the curve that we can't eliminate. And we're going to talk about that this afternoon. Don't worry about that yet. We have to choose what do we do with zone 2 and what we do with zone 1, because they're both in that area of the curve that I want to focus on. However, there's a slight difference between those 2 types of exercise. At least kind of like coming together with this piece here. I spend the next 2.5 hours looking at physiology, but I think an example would be much easier. Do you guys run? Anyone is like training seriously for a 5K or a 10K or something like that? No? Okay. See, no one does what we should do. Nope. This was the point. So we mentioned earlier that, so just follow along. I think numbers are easier with this time. We said that VO2 max, any type of effort, any type of work is a measurement of power. Which leads to the same concept in terms of adaptation. If I'm a beginner, complete beginner, and I want to run a 5K, I've never trained for running, I don't know anything about it. I sign up on a Sunday morning in Long Beach and I go do a 5K. And the only thing I know is that I'm going to do the 5K as hard as I possibly can, because I want to do the best I can. I run the 5K and I do 5K in 30 minutes, which is decent for a first time.
Yeah.
That equals to 6 minutes per K. That's my pace, right? That's my pace. So far so good? So this, and if you wear a Garmin will give you a number to that. That's the amount of power I can sustain for that specific effort, right? Now, here should be a relatively intuitive. If I go home and say like, I really like that 5K, I want to run in 25 minutes next year. And I go out and start training, but all I do for the next 6 months is training at this pace. Am I going to get any faster or not? No, because that's just pushing me to do what my body already knows how to do. I'm training right here. That's my peak power output, and I'm training right there. If you're serious about running, you'll do one of 2 things, or both. You're going to break down that distance into shorter intervals so you can run faster, or you're going to bring down the pace and run longer to build energy system. If you're a sprinter, if that's your 100-meter pace, what do sprinters used to do? Running uphill or downhill, where you create an overload of the system that forces you to increase that power output, where there's just enough load or just enough velocity to get adaptation. Which means that in this zone right here, where I'm at my power output, I don't really get that much better. So I don't spend all the time training there. I want to train here. That's the 90% of what I do as a strength and conditioning coach. That's the core of my intervention, because as long as I'm raising my strength at the bottom and my power at the top, as long as I'm raising my bottom with my heavy resistance training, if I want to develop power, that's my zone 2 training. That's where I want to focus the most. Because it's just enough heavier that forces me to get stronger at a higher velocity, but not too heavy not to produce power, or too light where I'm just producing the power that I'm capable of producing. Does that make sense? Does the analogy help a little bit? Okay. So there are 4 categories of exercise in that area. And when I say 4, it's not because there are only 4 that exist. For 4, we have evidence. There's many more. But on those other variations will be guesswork. And I would like to avoid guesswork, especially if you're paid to train people. Because then your check depends on the guesswork. It is not good. So I put it in this particular order. It's in order of power. Meaning, so follow along so that makes sense. If I were to take any other person here, So let's take you. And let's assume that you can do literally any exercise I throw your way, you can do. Like there's no like injury, your technique is perfect, you can jump, you can throw, you can do Olympic lift, you can do squat, you can do anything you want. Like there's everything you ask you to do, you're efficient. If I put you on a set of force plates and I measure your power in these 4 different exercises, here you're gonna get the greatest power output, here you're gonna get the smallest power output. Does that make sense? That's why they're on a scale. And we get to why of that in a minute. So if this is the example, what do you think? Remember, we're on the strength side of things. So nothing is plyometric yet. We're just looking at concept. We're looking at strength speed. Okay? What is the ultimate example of strength speed in a weight room? The most explosive lift you can do in a weight room. Olympic lifts. Any Olympic lift will be at the top here. Not all possible combinations of Olympic lifts. It has to be between 75 and 85% of water mass. If I'm focusing on power. That I know for a fact. So it doesn't matter, you don't have to do any singles. You don't have to be too light and do like technique work, unless you're a weightlifter. If you're a weightlifter, you can do whatever you want. But if you're using weightlifting to develop power, that's the goal you're going to stay at. Does that make sense? We're going to add some context to it in a second. Now we're going to draw a line, because that's a different skill. That's either a snatch or a clean and jerk. So they're different exercises. These 3, for right now, they're all going to be a variation of a back squat. So now we're just playing with load and velocity. We're not changing anything else. And that to say that can be a deadlift, can be a bench press, the same concept applies for all other lifts. What do you think is the second best option to Olympic weightlifting for strength speed? Second best option would be doing your back squat, but with velocity-based training at a very specific velocity, which is 0.5 meter per second. And we're going to get there when we start talking about VBT in just a little bit. Second best option. And everything will make sense once we listed them all. Third option, what do you think is the third option? If I don't have velocity-based training, what can I do to manipulate the load so that you still produce more power than normal? It's an acronym, 3 letters. You find it in 2 different permutations in the literature, depending whether the journal is published in the UK, they use a certain terminology, or Australia, US, but they describe the same thing. 3 letters. In the US, it starts with V, in the UK, it starts with A, but it's the same concept. Anyone into like West Side? Mm-hmm. What do they do at West Side?
Conjugate.
Conjugate. What's the dynamic effort on the conjugate method? What do they use for the conjugate method? What do they connect to the body?
Oh, chains
and bands. Which in the literature is called variable resistant training or accommodative resistant training. It's the same identical thing. Hasn't changed. You put chains or bands on top of your body. And even for that, adding the bands and the chains is not enough. The load needs to be between 30 and 60% of water max. Mm-hmm. And your isotonic load, so the load that comes from the plates, not the chains, needs to be equal to or greater than 50% of your total load. So you can't just throw chains in there and pretend it's going to work. Mm-hmm. And now I'm going to give a precise example of how to do that, which we just did in class last week. So, here's you, and here's the body you're squatting with. If I were to put you on a scale, the scale will show me a number. The number is your body weight plus the body weight. So far, so good? Mm-hmm. Now, I'm using a scale, not even force plates, just the basic of the basics. You weigh, whatever, 200 pounds. The bar weighs 45. The scales reach 245 pounds. We're good so far? Mm-hmm. Awesome. Now, first thing I need to do, I need to choose a load to target to, like what I'm going to prescribe you to train. Follow along every step of the way, because at the end, you tell me why velocity-based training is the best option. Mm-hmm. You won't have to tell it. I will not have to be the one telling you why. You'll tell me. So we need to choose the load that I want to train you at. Pick a load. Between 30 and 60%. Give me a number.
135.
Let's call it 135. And that 135 is 50% of your water max. So far, so good? Okay. So I know that in my setting, this is my body weight, so I just don't consider that because it's always going to be there. It's always going to be the same. With the empty bar, I have 45 pounds on me. I need to get to 135 to 20, right? So I want to add chains and bends to get to that load, right? So I'm going to keep the bar empty, and I'm going to put the bends on you. In whatever system I decide to put the bends, it could be a triangle, it could be a straight line, it could be just the chains, whatever. Whatever configuration I do squat it. For me to figure out what's the load of the system now, I'm going to read the number that the scale gives me at the top, and I was going to read, let's say, 290 pounds, because there's a lot of tension in the bend, so they're pulling down. And then I'm going to have you squat at the bottom, and read the number at the bottom of your squat. And now it's going to read 260 pounds. Because I have some load, but less, because the chains are sitting on the ground, or the bends on a longer stretch. Does that make sense? For me to figure out what's the overload on this system, I'm going to take 290 that I get at the top, and take away the system of my weight, so my body weight and the bar, and that gives me 45 pounds at the top. So the chains are adding 45 pounds at the top. I do the same thing at the bottom, and that's 15 pounds. I add them, which is 60, and I divide it by 2, 35 pounds. So that configuration is giving me a net load of 35 pounds. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So now I have my empty bar, which is 45 pounds, my bends that are giving me 35 pounds, that's 80 pounds. I need to get to 135, I just load the bar through whatever I have left to get to 135. If I mess up the maths, it's my fault. I'm just going with the flow, I'm not good at maths, I'm horrible at maths. But I hope the method is clear. Okay? Where did I mess up?
Oh, it's 30, not 35, that's all.
Hey, that wasn't that bad. I thought it was like a gigantic difference. There you go. Good. Is that correct now?
Yeah.
And that's why velocity-based training.
There you go. So far, so good? Okay. So all I need to make sure is that in this system, so now we have 85 pounds, right? So on the bar, I will need to add, now you make me nervous about doing math. 85, 95, 105, 115, 125, 135, 50 pounds. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is what I'm adding on the bar. The bar already weighs 45, right?
Oh, 40 pounds. For 40 pounds then, plus the 45?
So 50 is what, like this is what I have already, right?
Yeah.
45 is the bar.
Oh, yes.
And 30 is the bands. I already have 45. I need to add 50. Now I'm at 95.
Yeah.
I need to make sure that the isotonic load is equal to or more than 50% of my actual load. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Does the math add up now?
Mm-hmm.
So you need to do that. If you just throw chains on it, they're too heavy, you're not going to produce any power. So you're not getting any better. Does that make sense? These all come from meta-analysis, so we know that's the way it works. If you were to do the same thing, but the load is above 60%, whether you do with bands or you don't, there's no difference at all. So it only works in that very specific range of loads where if you overload it correctly, that tiny bit of incremental load is forcing you to move faster and therefore is improving your power. Does that make sense? I didn't come up with any of these numbers. I can give you 3 papers to read that the same identical calculations in it. The last option would be what we normally call explosive lifts, which I know it means pretty much nothing, but explosive lift means exactly the same lift that I did here, just isotonic, with no bands or chains. Where I give you the load and I ask you to move it as fast as you can. Does that make sense? So let's look at 2 things and that will solve all the questions. How much power do you think I can produce in an Olympic lift if I put you on 4 splits? Depends on body weight, of course, but roughly, an average athlete. Give me a number you expect from a clean.
15.
A little bit more, probably. More like 3,000 watts. Quite a bit more.
I thought you were asking about me.
Of course, like depends on the weight. If you're doing it with a kettlebell, it's not going to be that heavy. But if you're doing it with a bar, it's going to be the power you produce. How much power you think you can produce on a squat with VBT?
1,500.
Awesome. Very good. So quite a significant difference. What about a squat with chains and bands?
Like 1,200, 1,000?
900. A regular squat, 500. So you can see that this becomes smaller, but this is a gigantic change. Gigantic change. So, how do I say that in a very simple way? And in our labs, we have plenty of students doing research on this. Athletes that need weightlifting in the weight room are maybe 2% of the population. There's no need for weightlifting in strength and conditioning. And it's not my opinion, it's number driven. If you look at the amount of power that the average athlete generates on a field of play, if you take a soccer match, or a basketball match, or a volleyball match, and you average the power output of all different tasks, jumping, sprinting, changing direction, whatever the case may be, you are lucky if you get to 1,200 watts. That's the power they produce when they play their sport. They don't need to train at that incredibly high level of power. But now, the flip side of that, pick a thrower. A thrower on the very last step before the release is close to 5,000 watts because of all the centrifugal force where they load that implement. So they need to have some sort of heavy loading in the weight room for the neuromuscular system to develop that level of power. You take a cyclist, a sprinter, when they're coming down for their flying effort, on a bike, they're producing 2,800 watts, which if you account for 20% loss of efficiency, is close to 3,500 watts on a bike. Those athletes need Olympic lifting in their training, because that's the level of power the body needs to be able to produce. The majority of athletes can comfortably live without. Take like a triathlete, athlete produces like what? 120 watts when they're running, which is a lot for 8 hours, but they don't need that. They can just do explosive squats and they're plenty good with that. Does that make sense? Now, let's do this now, then we continue here. Same analogy here. If you remember earlier, we said that in the last meta-analysis, the 2026, the ACSM, they added the word compounds lift. Like you need to do compounds lift to get stronger. So, and these two concepts are very much complementary in nature. So, let me give you an example here. And I hope it makes sense. I applied the minimum effective dose that we discussed earlier. So everyone is training with 2 sets of 4 reps at 85% twice a week. So that's the training for all 3 groups, okay? For 3 groups of athletes, they all train the same identical way. One group of athletes is only doing leg extension, okay? Another group is only doing leg press. Another group is doing back squat. So everything is the same. The only independent variable is exercise selection. Okay? And then I train them for 6 weeks. Then I do my pre and post. So I compare strength training pre and post. If I say p-value and effect size, are you somewhere familiar with that? So p-value tells me whether or not the difference is significant, and effect size, how big the difference is. Okay. So they all train for 6 weeks, so the length is the same, and I test them pre and post on the same exercise that they use to train. So a leg extension 1 rep max, a leg press 1 rep max, or a back squat 1 rep max. They all of them are going to give me a p-value less than 0.05, and there's not going to be significant difference between groups. They all got stronger, period. If I apply the correct volume, in that particular exercise, they all got stronger. So far so good? Now I throw in another variable, and I said, now I'm also going to test them on an isometric mid-thigh pull. I'm doing an isometric test, okay? Pre and post. What do you think changes when I do the isometric mid-thigh pull? Which one will get the biggest change in isometric strength? This one is going to have an effect size greater than 0.05. This one, they're going to be significant, but the effect size is going to be close to 0.1, so pretty much insignificant. Which means they all got a little stronger on that isometric mid-thigh pull. If all you did was like train your quads, and then you do an isometric mid-thigh pull, you're going to produce a little bit more strength, but nearly not as much as a back squat. And the back squat is going to be the only one having an effect size. Now, to fully understand this, take these 3 exercises and give me the correlation with the peak power output. What is the correlation with peak power output? Meaning, how much these movements contribute to, let's say, greater jump height. If I take a leg extension, that correlation is going to be 0.2. If I take a leg press, that correlation is going to be 0.5. If I take a back squat, that correlation is going to be 0.9. Where do I want to invest more money?
Squat.
On the squat. Because they're going to give me the best transfer possible. So they're going to make me way stronger with the best possible transfer to performance. Similar here. If my sport doesn't require me to be very explosive, and my jump height is pretty average, think like a triathlete or like an endurance runners, I can do leg extension for the rest of my life and I'm going to be fine. I don't need to do back squat. I don't need that much strength. I can do my leg extension, I can do a little bit of explosive jumps, and I'm done. I don't need to complicate my training too much. But if I take a weightlifter where my power output is 5,000 watts, well then I need to do a whole lot of back squatting because I have to be a whole lot stronger. So exercise selection for power and strength doesn't work in terms of absolute. Depends on the person. There are normally data needs analysis what the sports require. Does that make sense? Did I lose anyone here? No. Okay. So now let's go back to this one, and then we're one more number to put on the board, and then we're done for you. Think about the exact example we did to get here. And now tell me why velocity, regardless of the power, just methodology speaking, why is velocity-based training better? You should have the answer if you think back at the same example that we just did.
It's more accurate.
Yeah, but in what way?
Less guessy.
All correct, but in what way?
You have to do less math.
Why? Well, less math, yeah, but I can do the math and still be accurate, but what is the margin of error though? So if I want to use these two that don't require velocity-based training, when I ask you to give me that example, I ask you one specific question. Give me the load. All we know is that the load is going to be between 30 and 60%. We don't know what load. It's a range of loads. If we want to know the load for that person, we need to put that person on a set of force plates, do an incremental test, find the load, and then prescribe the intensity. How much does a set of force plates cost? A lot of money. VBT tells me that no matter who you are, if you're moving a 0.5 on a compound lift, whatever load you need to use to move a 0.5 is the right load for you. Linear position transducer, $500 compared to $5,000 for a set of force plates. I still love all, very, very much. But you need to put it in context.
You gotta start making VBT devices, man.
I need that forever. But you see the point? That's why velocity-based training became so popular. Because if, in 20 minutes, we'll do a force velocity profile. It takes 15 minutes and $300 to know exactly what load to lift at. You don't need $5,000 and an hour worth of a protocol to figure it out. I think it's not the hour that's the problem, it's the $5,000 that's the problem. But still, it's way more accurate. Because I know that within a narrow range of exercises, doesn't apply to everything, but the core lift, like a squat, a deadlift, a bench press, whatever load you move at 0.5, and that load is going to be different. All of you will have a different load at 0.5, that doesn't matter. But as long as you're moving at 0.5, you are training in the right velocity and the right load. That's it, it's going to be the same for everyone. And now we're going to add on top of that velocity loss and other aspects of velocity-based training. Any questions? Is it 10 o'clock? Hopefully 2 hours. Any questions so far? Go for it.
The 0.5 meters per second, is that only, is that for all lifts across the board, like bench press, deadlift?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's a very good question. We actually did a little example in class on Monday because we did VBT. So in the literature you'll find, have you read something about VBT?
No, I can't say that.
They argue that that 0.5 is different because if you take a bench press or deadlift or a squat,
Yeah.
the minimum velocity threshold is different, therefore the number needs to change, which is accurate. What they don't tell you though is the MVT, most of those studies come from one sport only, which is powerlifting. Which means that all deadlifts are done in all possible shapes and forms, conventional, sumo, bench pressing is done with a big arch and a wide grip. If that's the case, this number is going to be different. Like a deadlift would be closer to 0.6, a bench press would be closer to 0.3, 4. So they're going to be different. But if you standardize it across the board, and you consider a conventional squat, so I-bar full depth, a conventional deadlift, so close grip, full range of motion, and a conventional bench, like sort of narrow grip, full range of motion without arch, that number is going to be pretty much the same. And we did it in class literally last week. Like you can take someone and ask them to do a regular bench press, they're going to get a 0.5 or a 70% of water max. So it's very accurate. Just in powerlifting, it doesn't work. I agree with you. Like if you want to train a powerlifter, you need to figure out what their MVT is and adjust those loads accordingly. But for the average population, it works just fine. Okay? What changes though gigantically is the load that you move at that velocity. We're going to talk about that when we do VBT. But everything that, so whatever happens here, don't worry about that. Just focus on this because that's what you need to do. And we're going to go back to this just a little bit in the afternoon when we go about program design. But in terms of prescription, the only thing I need to tell you, which we haven't covered here, we addressed load for all these conditions. We do have a measurement of volume in the literature, which is boring as hell, that says that for all these exercises across the board, it's 3 to 5 sets of 3 to 5 reps, 3 to 5 minutes of rest, once a week. That's all we know in the literature. That's literally all we know. There's no better way to do it. With strength training, it's very easy to quantify. For power, we know that it's somewhere in this range. The most important thing I want you to focus on is this. Because we don't know how often you need to do these lifts. All we know is that if you do them at least once a week, you're going to get better results. But there's no one that can tell you that twice a week or 3 times a week is better than one. It's impossible, at least data-wise, it's impossible to show that. But if you were to do them at least once a week, you're going to get better results. When we do plyo this afternoon, we know that this is a non-negotiable, this is a non-negotiable, this is all negotiable. You can live without. You can do strength and conditioning without these lifts. But we know that if you add them once a week, your results are going to be significantly better. Does that make sense? You don't need to have them in your program. Your program can be as simple as a back squat and a jump and you're done. But if you want to be more sophisticated, I encourage you to be because the difference is gigantic. If you add this in your program, you're going to be getting way better results. Gigantically better results. Does that make sense? Full transparency, number of reps, the only exception would be weightlifting because it's 1 to 3. Just for the weightlifting movements. And you find that to a T in the NSCA textbook. They just talk about single effort and multiple efforts when it comes to power. For that multiple effort is a squat because you don't rack bar between reps. You just do multiple reps. Single reps is a snatch because you snatch and then you drop. That's how the NSCA qualifies these lifts. That's the only difference you find. Everything else is the same. Any question? We cover all resistance training in 2 hours on the dot. Thank you.
If we did more than one time a week, we have to consider periodization then, right?
You need to find a way to make it fit, in a way.
Because you're not going to perform the way you did day 1, day 2, if you're recovering from day 1.
The way I usually solve this problem is that I just put them once a week.
Yeah.
And the other day of the week I do something explosive on the other side because it's lighter on load. But it comes down to your way of doing program design. It's periodization at the end. But as long as you make it fit once a week, you're doing gigantically better than the average. Let's take 10 minutes rest. 10, 15. That's why I do class. So I don't teach velocity-based training unless they do a force velocity profile first. I consider that to be your first day in velocity-based training, where you get to know each other, you like each other a little bit, you see what happens, and after we do that, then we do the theory of velocity-based training. So when we come back here in 10 minutes, if we have like a couple of people that are willing to do a force velocity profile, I'll just guide you through it. Dana can help us with the iPads and the gym aware, and we'll just see what happens, write down the numbers, and then we talk about that after we're done with that. And we can talk about VBT after. Okay? So 10 minutes, someone ready to squat, at least 2 people. Okay? Okay. Someone else? Okay, we have at least 2 volunteers willing to squat. Perfect.